Welcome back to Resonating Through Art. Today we're back in the dice realm, so now that you have some dice, we need a dice vault. Let's pour one. So this is the D20 dice vault, or dice jar mold. Comes in 3 pieces, and I'll show you how to assemble it and how to pour it. This is a fun mold, but it is a bit tricky, so just a heads up. You will need a deep pour resin for this, just because it is 15 ounces. So that's a lot of volume. So for 15 ounces on a 2-to-1 ratio, this is part B, and I'm measuring out 5 ounces. And then adding the 10 ounces of part A to part B. Then we mix until there's no more little ribbons or striations found within the resin. Since this is a thinner resin, this doesn't take as much work as a traditional 1-to-1 ratio. Once mixed, add your mica powder, or you could also do alcohol ink. In this case, I'm using ruby red for a nice, more solid dice jar. You don't always want to know people to know what's inside of it, right? So let that mix in thoroughly, get all the way in there. You can do this by hand, but I figured I'd use my nice little stand mixer. Once mixed, pour into the main core of the base. You're going to want to fill it about 2/3 of the way up. But stop, and at this point we're going to let the bubbles rise. This is going to be important. So now, while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to do the top. So this is the cap. Fill it up till it's just hitting the rim. One of the problems with this mold that I've seen a lot of people complain about is bubbles in these corners. So before filling it up the rest of the way, just dig into each of those corners with a soft object to work out the bubble. Even if you're using a pressure pot, a large bubble in here will still create a problem. Just work your way around to all of them. Then top it off. And that side is largely done for now. Now we're going to put the top in. Now you see there's a tab. Match the tabs. This is very important. If you do this wrong, your numbers will be off, and it isn't going to lock tight into place, and that will cause leaks, which is a big bummer. You don't want to waste resin. So just make sure it's seated nice and tight. All of your corners meet up. All the slots are in. Once you're happy with that, for safety's sake, use a hot glue gun to go along each of the edges to just make sure that you've got a nice proper seal. This is very important, otherwise you will end up with an entire top piece leaking out all over the place. Once you're sure it's sealed, make sure it's totally cool. Pouring too soon could result in resin leaking right through, and trust me, you cannot reseal easily with hot glue when the resin is seeping through it. Now, very carefully, slowly pour in the rest of the resin. or at least up to the top. You're going to have some left over. This will take a little bit. Just be patient. And occasionally a bubble will build up and cause a spill like this. It was not even close to being full. That's actually where the level is. So if this happens, just grab a stick or something to poke through and just work the bubble so that it's no longer sealing the entrance. Once you're set, clean up the edges real quick. This is important just to make sure that you can verify that it's not seeping through the hot glue seal. I'm not seeing anything leaking through, so I'm not terribly concerned at this point. I feel I can go ahead, after giving it a little bit of time to make sure it's not leaking, to go ahead and add more. So at this point, I'm going to run it all the way up to the top. I do recommend pausing and leaving it for about 10 minutes or so just to make sure that you've got a seal. A little bit of resin leaking out is a lot better than that whole cap. So again, just go real slow and let it fill in all those little holes. All the way to the top, and even fill in the little reservoir. And now, since this is a deep pour resin with a long cure time, I'm going to leave it sitting for several hours. So you can see how much the volume came down on it. That's about 10 hours later. I still have, liquid. It's a little thicker at this point, but now I'm filling it all the way up to the top. And then they have a little cap that comes with the mold. And this little plug can sit in here. The nice thing about that is it will also kind of create a bit of a vacuum, which will keep it from shrinking too much more. This is one of the steps that I've seen, which may be an issue because some people have thought that their mold has leaked out. It hasn't if they didn't go back and babysit and refill. You can keep refilling it as the day goes on. I find it's best to just come back at 10 hours or so later and go ahead and just fill it up all the way to the top. And now place in a pressure pot. Again, you can do this on the tabletop, but there's a chance that there's going to be some holes or some bubbles within the spots of your numbers. So it's generally just a bit easier if you have a pressure pot to pressure pot this, just because it looks so much nicer without any of those bubbles. And we're going to seal it up and let it go overnight. Well, not overnight, actually more than overnight. In this particular case, this is a 72 hour cure. So what I did is I actually saved some and had it in another mold on the tabletop to let me know when it was fully cured. Then I was able to open up my pressure pot and know that what was inside was all set and ready to go. I highly recommend, if you're going to do a pressure pot with a deep pour, have some on the outside from the same mixture, just so that you know when it's done. And now we demold. So the cap comes off fairly easily. The hardest part is kind of working around those little star edges, those corners. This is a pretty tough mold, so you can stretch it pretty decently. So I just pop it over those edge points and then work it out. And as you can see, everything is filled all the way up to the edge. There's no bubbles or voids at those edges. Nice corners. Now we set that aside and grab the big one. So this is a little trickier. First, you're going to remove all of the hot glue, which is going to detach from the silicone quite easily. Then pull the cap off. That part's easy. This is the harder part because it tends to want to flap back since it's been reinforced. So just be really careful. There's a bit of a hard edge where the lips meet. So don't cut yourself on that, and just walk it back really carefully. This is kind of like demolding any of those cups or pots. Eventually it'll pop enough and you'll be able to pull it free. And then just make sure your lid fits. And we're done. Well, okay, no, not quite. There's still a little bit more. Because of course we have to get the numbers on there. So taking acrylic paint, this is just like doing the regular dice. I've found that actually using a palette knife works the best on this, preferably a plastic one. Metal might scratch this. And then just slowly mash the paint in. You don't have to be neat about it. Just push it in there. Make sure you're getting all of the little crevices. Scrape it nice and even. And then using a wipe, you just remove all the excess. It'll be a little bit messy at first, so get the worst of it and then let it dry. So once you've got all the numbers painted and you've got it all dry, there's kind of a little bit of residue left from the paint. Take another wipe and just run it all the way around, cleaning out all those areas, making sure you get all of the excess off. This makes it nice and shiny. And do the same, of course, with the main body of the container. And voila, you have an awesome dice vault. Fit for anybody who loves to do tabletop gaming. You can do this in multiple colors, 2 different colors in inks with glitter, whatever you want. I mean, glitter might sink a little bit, but that gives you an idea of the size of the jar with some dice. So get out there, have fun. Play your imagination and have the special tools to do it with. And this will keep your lucky dice in a nice little home. Happy crafting!